What struck me today as I walked into this beautiful auditorium is that about half of you were on some kind of a personal device, either a cell phone or a iPhone or a laptop. And it's truly an honor and a pleasure to be here today. President Holland, faculty members, it's a great privilege to be at a school that not only teaches so many fine skills, but also has a strong affinity and capability for aviation. I know that many of you are curious, motivated students, ready to take on the world. But when I was your age, we did not have cell phones. We didn't have emails. We didn't have selfies. We didn't have texting. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have Snapchat. We didn't have Google. We didn't have Twitter. We had no computers. We had no social media, and we still survived. But there's one thing that we share in common, and that is that I made a lot of mistakes in my early 20s. And in that respect, we can probably relate to one another. But by growing professionally and continue to follow my passion for aviation and business on a global scale, I was able to recover from my mistakes and learn from them. So I would encourage you to focus on your passions, align yourself with your motivations and character, and don't just pursue those passions, but actually start today to set goals that maybe you were thinking of setting a couple of years down the road. Now, these may sound like repetitive cliches, but let me inject a dose of reality into February of 2018. When I was a naive 20-year-old, after I made this $50,000, I thought I would start an airline, which was one of the stupidest things I ever thought of. I was an undergrad student at UCLA. I possessed a strong passion and an inner desire to start a regional commuter airline along the west coast of the US. I thought about it a great deal. I did a lot of research. I developed a plan, and I just did it. This new airline was flying passengers within months of my graduation at the age of 22. I was actually the youngest chairman and CEO of a US scheduled certified airline in the US. But in spite of all the valuable macro and microeconomic courses that I took and all the wonderful professors I had at UCLA and mentors, I grossly underestimated the forecasted expenses of this operation, and also at the same time miscalculated, because I was over-optimistic, the revenue projections. So the costs turned out to be much higher and my revenues turned out to be lower. What this led to are massive losses incurred by an ambitious enterprise over a span of less than a year, which consumed a big chunk of my savings, lost the money that my friends and family invested, and other relatives that supported me, and it also led to breaking up with my girlfriend at the time, because I didn't have enough money to take her to the movies or take her to dinner. And I started asking her to pay for dinner, and she thought, this guy's a little weird. So the concept was good. The airline that I actually envisioned was a great concept. But the real marketplace and the competitive realities resulted in a business that failed to reach what I call break even, and that's where your income is at least equal to your expenses. And so by today's standards, it was a financial disappointment at the age of 22. I quickly learned that failure is a necessary and valuable stepping stone to achieving success. Experiencing all the dimensions of a business failure at a young age and the accompanying disappointment in retrospect became a strategic blessing and another part of my valuable education that you just can't learn in school. I realized that being the owner and the lessor of the airplane was the right side to be on rather than being the tenant and the operator. It's almost like if you rent an apartment, your rent is paying the mortgage of the landlord. And so the landlord is building up equity with your money as a tenant. So renting an airplane to operate an airline simply made the owner of the aircraft rich and made the operator of the airplane poor. So it's the same concept. As an entrepreneur, you have to understand the basic mechanics of capitalism. And this was a very quick lesson, but very expensive tuition. This course correction at the age of 23 allowed me to invent and pioneer an entire new global industry, which today encompasses more than $200 billion of modern commercial aviation assets and is the most consistently profitable segment of the airline industry. The lesson to take to heart is start down a path that embraces your personal goals and passions, but don't shy away from what might appear to be challenges and obstacles. There are hundreds of paths in front of each one of you, and the ones that often look the most appealing are the ones that are safe and unobstructed. But it's the tough and thorny ones that give you the most valuable lessons. But most people will refrain defensively from those tumultuous experiences. Add to the fact that the conditions in the world are filled with uncertainty and danger. The economics and the political landscape of the world and of the United States are increasingly unstable and, most of all, unpredictable. In spite of these realities, I encourage each one of you to be different and look beyond these boundaries. Go outside your personal comfort zone, tune out adversity as much as you can, and face your fears head on. You'll find yourself showered with rewards and growth as you overcome these obstacles step by step. The adversities along the way are really part of your postgraduate education. When I was just starting out as an entrepreneur, the door was slammed in my face by more than 90% of the people I interacted with. Whether they were bankers I was trying to raise money from, prospective customers that had no faith in my business concepts, suppliers that were skeptical. But all in all, these setbacks actually strengthened me, because from each rejection, I learned something that would become valuable later. I like to think of this as the analogy of water going downhill. When encountering a rock, the water simply just goes around the rock and keeps going. So one key priority is to start developing good habits, good work ethics, as well as a strong determination not to accept the word no as the final answer. At the same time, you have to be honest and transparent in all of your dealings and maintain high standards. Cutting corners will eventually haunt you. Develop this habit early so you don't have to worry about succumbing to temptations in the future, because ultimately, each one of you has to live with yourself. Dishonesty and secrecy only make life more challenging in the long run. So an important business acumen, in my opinion, is character and integrity. And these are essential because in the final analysis, doing the right thing does matter in business and the professional world that you're entering into. You will earn the respect of your peers and your superiors along the way. Clayton Christensen, who is a world-renowned Harvard Business School professor, stated, "It's easier to hold on to one's principles 100% of the time than 98% of the time." I found this to be true in my 40 years of business life. Another important habit you should start fostering at the earliest possible age is giving back. And giving back doesn't just mean money, but giving back experiences, helping younger students guide along their paths of challenges. Give back to your school, give back to your community, give back to your church, give back to your family members, give back to those that are less fortunate than you are. Because Winston Churchill, a wise British leader, once said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." The amount of time and monetary amount donated is not as important as the actual act or habit, and this can be an important formation in your life. Laura Arrillaga, a well-known Northern California philanthropist, said, "Giving is a universal opportunity, regardless of your age, profession, religion, income bracket, and background. you have the capacity to create change. And giving really is all about change, making someone else's life better. By acting now in your dreams, you will also find less likely to experience regrets in the future. There was a scientific article called Experience of Regret by two famous psychologists. And they found that time is a key factor in regret. Over the short term, we tend to regret our actions, but over the long haul, we regret our inactions. Over the course of an average week, a typical 22-year-old regrets outnumber inaction regrets by 53 to 47%. So you regret 53% of what you may have done that was a mistake, and you regret 47% of what you could have done but you didn't do. But over the course of a lifetime, according to the study, the inaction regrets, in other words, regretting stuff that you could have done but you didn't, outnumber the action regrets 84% to 16%. So as you commit, to your bright future, please face this future with a strong determination, a high level of optimism, faith and hope in yourself, while recognizing that there'll always be steps backwards, disappointments along the pathway to progress. The best illustration of starting now is the story of my own parents, who were born in Budapest, Hungary in the early 1900s. After World War II, and after surviving the onslaught of Nazis and the Russian armies, my parents could have just accepted their fate and adapted to the oppressive regime of living in a communist country behind the Iron Curtain. Through no fault of their own, they wound up living in the wrong place, the wrong country, at the wrong time. Simply stated, living in an oppressive era of Stalin-dominated Europe in the 1950s was no picnic, and their future looked sad and bleak. But instead, my parents chose to envision a future of freedom and opportunity in the U.S. They acted with urgency, knowing that their actions, which took place during a period of life-threatening risks, would give their family and future generations of their family the liberties they were lacking in their home country. So they were willing to take high risk to try to escape, even risk their life for that yearning for freedom. These crucial decisions required courage and determination, just like each one of you will require courage and determination to make the big next steps after your graduation, and a willingness to face risks and unknowns head on. As I look out to you today, I'm filled with hope because I see a lot of potential leaders here, people with imagination, people with creativity, and potential leaders. But the move is really up to you. And our nation is at a crossroads today. Our nation needs you. There's an acute leadership vacuum in Washington. Our adversaries are becoming more sophisticated while our country is getting deeper and deeper in debt. Your generation and your children will have to shoulder a big part of that national debt because governments are spending beyond their means. Waste, duplication, inefficiencies, and corruption at the federal, state, and local government levels represent as much as 15 to 20% of their total expenditures. So a lot of work needs to be done to make our governments more efficient. The American dream is at risk because the cost of entitlements and redistribution of income, coupled with a broken and ever-rising tax system, is almost like a drug addiction that's not easily cured. So just as North America is on the cusp of total energy independence, excessive government regulations, taxes, bureaucratic red tape are creating strong headwinds to our progress in this important area. Our nation is progressively eroding its leadership stature among both our allies, and we have less respect from our enemies. Our foreign policies are disjointed and lack coherent long-term strategic vision. And it takes more than one term president to turn that around. It almost seems like at times Congress and our legislators are more interested in getting reelected than addressing the urgent needs of our population, in the United States. We cannot, under any circumstances, allow America to slide into the same socialistic tendencies that have captivated Western Europe in the post-World War II era. What happened to Europe? In this century, it can be easily summarized as stagnant economic growth since the 1950s, lack of decisive leadership, a continent unable to militarily defend itself, and one that carries the highest tax burden in the civilized world. In some of the Scandinavian countries, it's almost 90% of your income goes to taxes. These policies have stifled innovation, productivity, and living standards, the very things that you as students are yearning for in your life. And at the same time, population growth in Europe has virtually stopped. Aging demographics also resulted in shrinking of the percentage of people that work, and the numbers of those living off state pensions have been rising. As a result, you have a whole continent with very little GDP growth, coupled with fiscal paralysis and unsustainable economic policies. It is up to the young generation to amplify and safeguard your future and ours, and to execute the vision of our forefathers who crafted the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Otherwise, the lesson of recent European history will go unlearned. Our national standing, our freedoms, and our elite status in the world are at risk unless each one of you, the young generation, makes a proactive commitment to improve our future so our children will have a better America than what we're experiencing today. Eric Roth, in the screenplay writer of Curious Case of Benjamin Button, wrote, "What I think is, it's never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start anytime you want. Change or stay the same. There aren't any rules. We can make the best or the worst of it, and I sure hope you make the best. I hope you see things that startle you, feel things you've never felt before. I hope you meet people that have a different point of view. I hope you challenge yourself every day. I hope you stumble once in a while, but pick yourself up and be stronger as a result. I hope you live the life you wanted to when you look back 50 years from now and have as few regrets as possible. And if you haven't done these things, today is the day to start all over again. So now I proclaim to all of you, today is the day that is not too late. Don't have any regrets years from now that you did not grasp the energy and the ingenuity of your youth to make the world a better place. The next 10 to 20 years will probably prove to be just as exciting, as unpredictable, and dramatic in the history of the world as the events of the last 20 years. And you're here today to prepare yourselves to be devoted to excellence in whatever field you select. But promise yourself that you will not fear the unknown by stepping forward with great expectations. Reach for what appear to be elusive and worthwhile goals, and set levels of higher achievement for yourself. Cast aside your handicaps, build upon your strengths, and overcome obstacles one by one. I would like each one of you that are here today to succeed in your professional careers, because for every one of you in the audience today, for every one of you, there's millions of decent young men and women out there in the world who are starving, who have no opportunities, who are uneducated, they're hungry, they're jobless, they're deprived, they have no freedoms or even the ability to travel and see the world and realize their full potential. So you're extremely lucky to be here. Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, wrote in the book On Man and the Universe, "Education is labor for life, which will make us courageous." In other words, education is a way to gain self-confidence and courage to face the real outer world. In other words, we must never stop seeking to further our education, keep learning, keep broadening your horizons. Abraham Lincoln, one of our finest presidents, said, "Whatever you are, be a good one." You are a very privileged group being associated with UVU. I was very impressed today getting a campus tour. I had no idea how impressive this place is. And just seeing the faces of the students, the enthusiasm, the beautiful artwork, the connectivity, I think it must be a real privilege to go to school here. And I don't think that some of you perhaps realize how lucky you are. Each one of you has a very powerful weapon besides your iPhones, besides your iPads, and that's your mind. Your mind has talents that can take you far and beyond your present comprehension. Have the courage to apply what you've learned and continue to search for more knowledge and the pursuit of excellence. Please do not allow short-term setbacks, whether they're personal or professional, to be adversities or stop the show to hinder your forward progress. This precious resource, your mind, in my view, has magical powers to help conquer mankind's greatest challenges. The seeds for your success have been laid. Innovation and creativity are key ingredients for your success. My sincere wish is extended to all of you, and I humbly hope that these remarks in a small way will motivate you, guide you, that you can fulfill your true dreams and ideals. Let this UVU experience be your launching pad for a better and brighter tomorrow. Only you can make that happen. I trust you, I believe in you, and may God bless you. Thank you very much. We have time now to have a Q&A. So please stand and identify yourself, and I'm open to talk about any subject. Sure, I shall. Speak slowly and clearly so we can. Please, in the red. Two questions. Okay. As long as they're not personal. So that's your first question. So her first question is, in spite of taking macro, microeconomic courses, it appears in retrospect they did not help me deal with failure, right? Is that kind of the concept? And what can we do to better be prepared as we go out into the world to minimize the impact of failure? Second question? Yeah, that's going to take about 10 minutes. Look, the role of the university is basically to lay foundations upon which you can build. It's not meant to build the whole structure, the whole building. The economics courses, micro, macro, teach you some very fundamental aspects of economics, business, and how the world operates in commerce. And those are very, very important tools. So it's almost like if you train a mechanic and you give him a tool belt, and it's got, all the wrenches and screwdrivers and all the other equipment, he's got the tools, but then he's got to be able to use those tools. So the university here is giving you the tool belt. It's giving you the things that you need to get out into the world. But the actual experiences of success and failure come as a result of an effort that you have to make. And then you need to deal with those yourself. Now, you can surround yourself with mentors. You can surround yourself with colleagues. You can surround yourself with people that have been exposed to that particular profession or business and learn from those experiences. And also today, with the wealth of information available on the internet, you can look up practically anything. You can read bios of people that have succeeded and failed. You can read about bios of people that didn't even go to college, that have made billions. You can read about entrepreneurs that had a vision and maybe they stumbled along the way. The wealth of information that you have available outside of the university courses can supplement those tools that you learn here. So I hope that's helpful. Second question? Mm-hmm. Look, there's two experiences. You can go through a harsh situation like what we went through in Eastern Europe and Romania and Poland and Czech Republic, Hungary, and there's people that accept their fate and say, look, this is what happened. There's nothing I can do about it. There's those that will not accept their fate and actually do something about it, either escape or find some dramatic way of altering their circumstances. I think what taught me the most about living in a communist country is that in first grade, as a 6-year-old, in the classroom, there was a picture of Stalin and Lenin in the room. There was no picture of a Hungarian king or any Hungarian person. It was two Russian communist leaders. We had to sit every day for an hour and a half with your hands behind your back to listen to communist brainwashing about how decayed the American imperialist system works and how terrible it is here and how only the Russian socialist communist system is the only way to live. And when you listen to that as a child over and over, and you're forced to learn Russian and you're forced to do, you're told to do everything you're doing. You have no independence. You have no right to choose even what school you're going to go to. They'll designate what higher education you're going to go to. That system doesn't work, and it didn't work, and it broke up. But when you grow up as a child in that environment, you're yearning for freedom. You're yearning to just get out of that eggshell that's limiting your potential. Mm-hmm.
How are you to recover from that, mindset-wise and financially wise?
Well, at the time, I thought it was devastating because I put my own money in. I borrowed money from family members, from relatives. I paid everybody back. So in the end, nobody lost any money. What I found is that at that young age, you're almost like a spring. You get compressed, but then you can go back to your normal state pretty quickly. Had I gone through that experience 20 or 25 years later and have a family and children and responsibilities, it'd be a lot more difficult. What I'm really trying to say is that if you're going to have failures, get those over with as early as possible. If you're going to mess up, do it, probably before 25, 28. That's when you have room to experiment and do things that maybe later on you don't have the latitude to do. In my case, I studied a lot about aviation and airlines ever since I was like a young teenager. So I had the knowledge base, it's just that I applied it in the wrong direction. I felt very entrepreneurial, and I was over-optimistic, and I learned the lessons the hard way. But after the failure, I still had that basic foundation of knowledge, and even more so as a result of the failure. And then I was able to reapply it and develop an industry that did not exist, which is aircraft leasing. And that has become, a great global industry. But it took a lot of hard work. And to recover from a failure like that, it's not easy emotionally, socially. You lose a lot of self-confidence, but you just got to keep fighting. It's like a football team that's the best in the league, but sometimes they lose a game. And maybe it's because they lose a game makes them a better team in the next game. So I look at failure as a lesson to do better rather than failure in itself. And I think as a young person, we have a tendency to kind of look too inward about failures, and we kind of feel sorry for ourselves and why did this happen to me and why is Joe not having the same problem? Quit feeling sorry for yourself, because every one of you sitting here today is probably in the 1/10 of 1% of the most privileged people in the world. If you look at the global population of, 7 billion, you guys out there are in the cream of the crop category. So there's really no excuse for feeling sorry for yourself. If you do, you need psychiatric help.
Nathan with the School of Aviation. You mentioned that we should not shy away from challenges and that we should seek out opportunities and not make choices because it's difficult. So I'm wondering, in these situations, how do we make decisions to move forward without the fear of failure, but also without being reckless and without making catastrophic failures?
Well, I'll give you a small example. Let's say you want to go to School of Aviation and you have dreams of becoming a pilot, but it's a very expensive course relative to just being a normal student, say in liberal arts or some of the other areas. So the cost may be like an adversity, and you say, okay, I can only maybe get my private pilot's license because that costs X, but to go the full way to become qualified as an airline pilot, I just can't afford that. So by making that decision, you're actually foregoing a bright future. So what you might have to do is make some additional sacrifices, maybe get another job on the weekends, make some extra money, maybe borrow a little money, cobble together a package that enables you to go to that next level. But then for the next 40, 50 years, you're going to enjoy a whole different lifestyle than if you just stopped there and said, okay, I'm just going to have a private license, which doesn't get you any kind of a income potential. So if you have the dream and aspiration to become a pilot, don't stop at the first level. So it's like going to school. You don't stop in elementary school. You got to keep going. And to do that, you're going to have to make some major sacrifices, and you'll have to forego certain other things in that journey to get to the point where you're qualified to become, very successful in that field. And so those are tough decisions. Do I take the easy route, or do I take the one that's a lot more risky and involves a lot more expenditure, a lot more work, a lot more sweat? And but there's a goal, and unless you have goals, you're just sort of drifting, basically. Back there, in the red.
My name's James Daniel. I'm in the accounting program. How would your life be different if you had never failed?
It would be, I would be way back. I mean, I would be probably 30 years behind in achievement, because if you only succeed and you never taste failure, you never really then reflect on what went wrong and how you could have done things better. So none of us are perfect, and so, I mean, failure can take many dimensions and levels, but I think it's really important, as I said earlier, to kind of go out of your comfort zone early. You don't want to risk all your savings when you're 50 years old and you have kids and you've got children in college and you've got responsibilities that really prevent you from making those, let's say, over-courageous decisions. So take the gutsy decisions early, make your moves early. You'll have setbacks, but you're going to be a lot better off for it. Trust me, it works. Yes?
Greg Hale at School of Aviation. You talked about how you decided to start an airline and
It failed financially, not operationally. It was okay, but if
Failed financially,
Right.
how do you go to another, maybe bank or another loan, somebody to give you a loan to start another business and try and, show them that, hey, that failure was just one thing?
well, I was fortunate that I didn't borrow any money from a financial institution, so no one was left. No bank was sort of unpaid. It didn't. I don't think they had credit scores back then like they do today, but there was no record of unpaid liabilities. Basically, the failure resulted in in my personal resources and that of my family and friends and relatives. And the business plan that I developed after that failure was much more credible because it had a higher degree of predictability on revenues and expenses, and so it had a much more solid set of credentials. But still, most of the banks just told me that I belonged in an institution. But there was one bank that felt this actually made sense, and they stepped up to the plate. Yes?
So you started this industry and you by a lot of standards found success. What motivates you today to keep motivated, to keep pushing forward in this industry?
Well, the thing has changed is that uh, when I started in aviation, there was about 20 to 25 million passengers a year flying in the U.S. airline system. I'm just talking about the United States. Last year, in 2017, we had over 700 million one-way passenger trips on the airlines. So the growth in this business, and it's even more acute outside the U.S., is far greater than population growth or GDP growth. And commercial air transportation has become sort of the global network of connecting people, businesses, commerce. It's an indispensable part of the global economic system. And since most airlines outside the U.S. didn't have the financial resources to buy planes, I thought it was a good idea to create a mechanism where they could lease the planes for 5, 8, 10 years and allow them to operate new equipment even if they didn't have the financial resources on day one to buy the planes. So our business has fueled not only the U.S. economy in the sense that in having bought thousands of new planes from Boeing, we've indirectly helped employment for tens of thousands of high-paying jobs in all the aerospace industries that support civil aircraft manufacturing. We're creating avenues for foreign countries to also develop and grow because they depend so much on air transportation, both passengers and cargo. So, I just believed that not only was I serving a business cause, but also a social cause. And today, the greatest satisfaction is mentoring younger people that enter into aviation and helping them create their dreams. Yes?
So just kind of based off the last question, with the advancement of technologies nowadays, specifically like driverless cars, and then I saw like Elon Musk got like the Hyperloop approved.
Yes.
What do you think that does to the airline industry in the distant future? What does that kind of look like?
Well, it could change the relatively short haul transportation, like say from here to Las Vegas or from LA to San Francisco or New York to Washington. It could revolutionize ground transportation. We're looking at autonomous aircraft, drones that potentially could first carry freight and then someday operate without flight crew members. Right now, and this is kind of a joke, Boeing is working on a new design of a plane because pilot expenses are tremendous. I mean, a cockpit crew, one cockpit crew on a commercial airline in the U.S. probably costs about $500,000 a year if you include all the benefits, training costs, medical, salaries, bonuses, profit sharing, 401ks. So the idea is that instead of a pilot, two pilots in the cockpit, there would be one pilot and a dog, because a dog is cheaper than, a union pilot. The purpose of the pilot would be to feed the dog. And the purpose of the dog would be to bite the pilot if he touches anything because of new technology. But I think that funny story actually is going to become more and more applicable as I was at a board meeting a few days ago, and one of the board members is the CEO of the largest trucking company in the U.S. And he was telling me that they're looking into more and more driverless large trucks that would go transcontinental, which will eliminate the need for a lot of truck stops and a lot of the other, support services to keep truck drivers going. I think we're looking at more automation, more robotics in manufacturing, in medicine, in transportation, in manufacturing. So I think that's even more important reason for all of you here to really have specific skills that will not only be valuable today, but 10, 20, 30 years from now. We have time for a couple more questions. Well, I just want the audience to get their 50 minutes. Yep.
I'm Peter Nelson. I'm an aviation student. And my question for you is, there's a quote by Will Durant that says, we are what we repeatedly do, therefore excellence is not an action, it's a habit. So my question for you is, what best practice would you suggest that we as aviation, as business students, take into our careers post-graduation that will help us to succeed and to kind of rise excellence?
I think the most fundamental one is that I think today's young generation has a little bit of this, what can you, the company or whoever you're working for or with, what can it do for you? And my challenge to you is, if you really want to exceed, think about what can you do to that enterprise, organization, or institution to make them better. Because if you can make them better, that's going to rub off on you. It's going to be recognized. So I realize we're all much more impatient today than earlier generations. We want quicker rewards. We want more instant gratification. We want more connectivity. We want to see stuff happen. We're not going to sit around and wait for things to happen. But I would encourage you to think of it, what can I do as an individual to make my surroundings better, whether that's a company or a club or an educational institution. What can you contribute that will make them different and better than they were yesterday? And I think that sort of mentality is going to be much better than sort of that selfish attitude of what can this company do for me? How much money will they pay me? How little do I have to work? In other words, kind of reverse the roles and be an added value rather than someone that just takes away from an organization. Thank you very much.